Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Facebook live broadcast. I'm Steve Altition, Director of Client Partnerships here at Pacific Cascade Legal. Today, I'm here with life coach Amy Stone to talk about Step Parent Success School. I love that topic. So, Amy, before we start in, can you just kind of talk a little bit about yourself and how you got to be where you're at right now?
Absolutely. So, my name is Amy Stone, which you touched on. I am a stepmom. I was a stepmom before I was a parent. So, I'm a step parent and I'm a parent. And today and for the last several years, I have offered coaching, life coaching for step parents. So, I speak from my own heart. I share my experiences and what I experienced and the things that I've studied along the way. And I do that to help people be more intentional about building the life that they love regardless of how their family is constructed.
I love it. And what I really like about today is, we've had a lot of Facebook Lives about a lot of issues in parenting, and step parent is usually like one of the little topics near the end. So this is all about step parenting. I'm really looking forward to that. So, but before we get into what the heck step parent success school is, can you talk a little bit about the unique challenges that step parents face?
I think you hit on one in your description. And so it shows up in the research in that step parents feel they describe their situation as being isolated or as outsiders, and they feel unsupported. And one of the systemic things that creates that, in my opinion, right? I'm not a researcher, is this weird setup where 4 out of 10 adults might spend some time in their life as a step parent in that role. And yet there are very, very few dedicated resources that are directed to step parents. To put it in like a comparison, right? There's bazillions of resources for planning weddings, for throwing baby showers, and for getting divorces. And yet, step parent is like a footnote in most other resources that you almost have to be in another bucket to find, right? So if you're a step parent and you're not in the divorce bucket, you might not find the resource. If you are a step parent and you're not in the parent bucket, you might not look in the right places. And so it is hard to find support, which is weird because everybody knows somebody who is either a step parent or a step kid or has been a step parent. So that's one of the big challenges is
Yeah.
finding that. Yeah.
You would think that, at least for me, that would make me feel very isolated.
Yeah.
And that whole, okay, who do I turn to now? Is this just what it's going to be? Um, what would you say to someone who said that to you? It's like, I just feel like I'm doing it all on my own and going backwards.
Yeah. What I say to people when they say that is usually two things. I distinctly remember that feeling, which I offer to people as a way of jumping in and validating that it is not unusual to feel that way. And so the path out of that though is to do the work and work through it. Like as long as you're focused on, oh my gosh, this is my problem, this is horrible, this is how I feel. That's you don't realize it, but you're sort of spinning in place. And so the having access, and this is, it's one of the reasons I speak so openly about my experience, because I'm on the other side. My stepkids are grown. My marriage is solid. It is what it is. And so I can openly talk about how hard it was in the beginning, how isolated I felt. And I do that with the intention that for the person who is sitting in their car, feeling isolated, not sure what to do for back to school night, sitting on the floor of their closet, questioning their life choices, that there has been somebody else who has felt that way and can hopefully be a beacon of here are some things to do to go from there to where you want to go. And it can feel very tough. It's hard to read the label from inside the bottle, and it often requires to make that jump, somebody to give you an idea of where to go. It doesn't have to be me. Sometimes that can be a friend. It can be someone like you. It can these these nudges can come in crazy places. You could be at the Starbucks and somebody will say something and you're like, oh, there's my clue. That's what I want to do. But it's having somebody who can lead you on the way. So I share my experience for those folks. And I also would just gently say that it doesn't have to stay this way.
Yeah.
So what we're experiencing right now, whether it's, and this is not just for step parenting, right? This is for such a variety of things. What we're experiencing right now feels like it will never end. It probably will.
I, first of all, I'm going to steal the nugget you gave, which is you can't read the label from inside the bottle.
Isn't that a
I
great way to
love
say
that.
that? Yeah.
It's a great way to say
I
it.
didn't come up with it myself. I stole it from Scott Galloway. So
Well, it's like they say, okay comics, write their own stuff. Good comics steal it from someone else.
that's it. Yes, no, absolutely.
So you also, and it was somewhere in your stuff, I read that, you know, step parents can get stuck in. I'm wondering if this is also to do with your background, get stuck in a cycle of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. It just,
Yes.
what does that mean?
So the whole thing or just the last one? Because the last one is the one that people are
The
usually
fawn one
surprised.
is the one that's interesting. Yeah.
Right. So the fawn one is a different stress response. So those everybody has heard flight, fight, and it's you can't say it. It's a tongue twister, right? But
Yes.
those are our responses, and they absolutely are. But there's another survival response which is altering your behavior so that you are non-threatening. And so sometimes it's called people pleasing. Sometimes it has other more descriptive words. But this is equally as destructive to somebody's self-confidence and their sense of empowerment. And we don't notice it. We don't notice it. So it's all of the stress responses we learn through we make these decisions is the safest way to be. But if you're staying quiet and not speaking up because you don't want to talk, you don't want to have a fight, right? You're
Yep.
also not speaking up for yourself. You're not giving yourself a voice. And frequently in relationships, this is not limited to blended families, but resentment will build. And resentment often starts with a kernel of feeling unheard or unvalued or untreasured and just like unmet things. And so looking at our behavior and saying, where am I modifying my actual behavior to try and be less of myself in order to not contribute to what I'm avoiding? That's a stress response that can say, oh, you know what? I'm under more stress than I think I am. People will say, oh, I just don't want to rock the boat. That might be fine, right? That totally might be fine. I have a neighbor who is like totally up in my business all the time. I don't bring it up with her because that would be rocking the boat. And I live with her, right? I don't think that's a problematic behavior. I think that's getting along with my neighbor. But if you live with a family and you're not speaking up for yourself, right? So in my case, this was allowing mess when my stepkids were around. My husband had advocated for himself, and I was really bothered and didn't speak up for myself, and I was miserable. Now, in my own situation, what actually happened is that I exploded. But the root of preventing that explosion in the future was learning how to give myself a voice and have the courage to not fawn and not avoid the conflict.
I love that. We get a lot of, obviously being a family law firm, a lot of people who come in and they say, I just I, I don't want to rock the boat, like you said, or speak up.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's this new family. And, you know, my thoughts always goes to, well, if you make yourself stronger, you make the whole family stronger.
Yeah. I mean,
It's not
when
taking
working with
away.
step parents, I do, so there's not always divorce in
No,
a blended family, but there is a lot of the time. And so when you've got one parent, one of the sort of truisms about divorce is that it's almost always an unpleasant process, even if
yeah,
it goes really smoothly, right? And so on the other side of it, it's really common that the adults will have sort of, lingering behaviors. So if you have a really, really high conflict divorce, it's not to be unexpected that the parents, the adults, will be modifying their behavior. They don't want to have those fights with their former spouses. And that can be a really tricky spot for a step parent to be. But avoiding the conversation is not usually the answer. And so the tool that I offer the people that I work with is what I call respect and honor, right? So honor the previous relationship, including all of the warts and foibles and whatever is there. Like, don't sugarcoat it, and respect it for what it was, because it's a part of the history of the family, right? And then from there, figure out what needs to happen, right? Figure out what needs to happen. So if you've got a spouse who doesn't want to engage with their ex for fear of conflict, you can respect it and you can honor it. And you can also say, hey, listen, all of this is true, but here's where it's showing up as a problem on our daily basis. Like, what is the best way for us as the new family, the new unit, to really look at what's happening and create our best life together? And that
That
doesn't have to be a fight.
I love that. And it totally leads to what we're here to talk about, which to me is a tongue twister, as it turns out.
It is.
Step
It
Parent
is.
Success School.
It totally is. It totally is. So it is absolutely called that to I named it that because a lot of resources for parents and divorcees and step parents are all named after pain points. Anxiety, struggling, all of those things. And I wanted to put something positive in the title, because I want that to be the goal, and the purpose. But it is a tongue twister, and it's also really long and hard to type because it has a bazillion S's in it. It's just, so I have a shortcut when everything in the back office is just three S's. SSS is Step Parent Success School.
I like that. So can you talk a little about them, why you created it, and who, you know, I want to say who is it for, is how it, as much as is how a step parent, which step parents might think, okay, this is going to help me.
So absolutely. So one of the challenges, which will not surprise you, but one of the challenges is that a struggling step parent doesn't necessarily feel comfortable raising their hand and talking about what's going on. And I have been fortunate over the last several years to work with hundreds and hundreds. I should add it up, but lots and lots of step parents who have taken that big jump and set up a meeting with me and talked to me face to face. And one of the things that I offer is that ability to talk about private stuff, without being outed. There's privacy, but it is a big jump to do that. It's a huge jump. And so I know, we talked about that. It's hard to find support. It's also hard to get the courage to talk about these things. So Step Parent Success School is built on actually a framework. I went and studied marriage coaching, like so premarital routines that people do. And I studied that outline and I used my experience and my knowledge and I updated it to include some of the things that are just not covered, right? So that are, if you're a step parent, if there's divorce, the extended family, those things that come up and the tools that go through there. And it's very specifically designed to be accessible. No one except you needs to know that you're there. No one needs to be a part of it. It's in video and audio. You can listen to it in the subway while you go to work, in the bathroom while you're hiding from your partner. And it's meant to be foundational tools to identify what's bugging you and give you strategies to improve that. And then also an introduction to where you might find other resources and tools, right? Because when we talked about feeling isolated, one of the things that happens when you feel isolated and like an outsider is you get this track running in your head that you are a unicorn special snowflake. And in my experience, sometimes we are, right? Sometimes we are. You are very special. Those of you who are watching this, you're very special and you're unique. But a lot of the tools that I teach for step parent success, they apply in lots of other places. And so that's really empowering in my mind. So I give people resources where it's are like, this is where I learned this. This is how you can apply it. And here's where you can find, more support on those things. So that's where that came from.
I well, first of all, the pre training I got many years ago was just having to tell our priest that I didn't kill a former spouse in order to marry her. So, not a whole lot of training going on there.
That's so. I did not the person I did marry, but I did traditional Roman Catholic premarital counseling that I thought was actually very helpful, but it didn't work out the way the priest would have liked it to. In one of the workshops, they were taking us through a question. I realized that I did not want to marry that person as a part of this
Oh
premarital
my
counseling.
God.
And I thought this was a wonderful conclusion, and I was very thankful for it. And the priest was like, no, this is not what you're supposed to do with this piece of information. You're supposed to reconfirm to the tenets of the religion and come back. And I was like, oh, nope, not going to do that. And so, but if it is especially for step parents, one of the reasons having now, I always get these flipped up, but like a lot of premarital stuff is oriented through faith-based organizations, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually very good. But wherever you step out of that corner, you might find a challenge in finding the resources. So it is helpful to have some that are not tied to that. And then there's another piece of that, which is that a lot of family resources are tied to social services, and social services often
Yeah.
kick in with emergencies and
Yeah.
crises. And so there's a gap, which is the person who's trying to get help who hasn't had a crisis. And so there's nothing wrong with it's all wonderful services and wonderful options. It's just that those are two spots where people can fall through the cracks.
Yeah. Yeah. So, can we talk a little bit about how step parent success school actually works? I mean, there's the
Yeah,
word school in it. So is it like a class? Is
it
it,
is.
how does it actually work?
So the way it actually works is you sign up. You don't have to talk to me or do anything, and you sign up, and it's delivered. Probably 5 years ago, people would not have understood this the way they do, but it's an online course, and so you're immediately delivered to a learning platform. Again, that's a set of words that would have meant nothing to most people, but I think everybody does know that at this point. And you can pick and choose which ones you want to do, which modules you want to do. They're titled. And then you're also, because there's this horrible bit of research, which is that nobody ever completes online courses, like nobody. So I have a follow-up sequence where I drip it out to everybody as they go through and make sure that I'm there to support people as they go through. So even if you go through it out of order, you get it general message from me. And in each one of those is a little prompt like, hey, if you have any questions, here's how you can reach me. So it's asynchronous. You can do it whenever you want. We can be totally separate. But most people will reach out to me at some point or another and either let me know that they have more questions about something or that they want to talk about something that was brought up.
I was wondering if there's certain topics in the school that are hit harder, you know, most important, most helpful. I do know that when I was going through some of your stuff on your website, which by the way is great,
Thank you.
you talked. I saw two terms that I thought were interesting. One was step money,
Okay. Yep.
and and one was boundaries. And we kind of understand boundaries, but the step money thing, is that something that you talk about?
So I did, how long ago? I guess it was last January. I did an entire virtual summit where I talked about financial topics. I brought in a bunch of people who talked about money issues specific to step parents. So you are probably aware of this because you are in a legal office. Money is a huge fight in all relationships. And that's not even just marriages, that's business partnerships, community garden clubs, like people fight about money. And there are specific situations that come up in step families and blended families. Actually, I guess the better way to say it is complex families. So large complex families have a different set of financial circumstances than others, and they can get really emotionally loaded. And it is my experience as someone who lived the step parent experience, you can be completely unaware of this until it's impacting your life. So, and no one, no one is talking to step parents directly about money. Um,
Oh,
right? It's like, and money breaks up. That's where mediation falls apart. That's, I mean, it's a whole huge thing. So I brought in mediators and financial advisors and certified divorce financial analysts, which is a
yep,
classification, right? Because a
yep.
lot of this knowledge is really um, concentrated in the divorce world, right? So I got to notice that something had shifted.
I did too.
So it looks like we might still be streaming,
I
but it's
believe
not
we.
recording. All right, so I will keep going. The so I wonder. Okay, so what was I saying? Oh, so I brought these all together because it really is a spot where I feel like if you have information, you can make different choices. And the choices are not necessarily good or bad. It's just more information. And to know that there are resources. I'm not a financial advisor, and I'm not a financial planner, but I have been through, when my dad passed away, I had to deal with the estate planning, and I had to, that was the first time I thought about it. I was like, oh, well, wait a second. Is this mine? Is it my husband's? How do I want to pass things on to my stepkids or not? Those are all questions that are valid. And the short answer is that probably all of it is possible if you decide and you talk about it and you know what you want. And there are really, really smart people who will help you in that.
Yeah,
Um, one of the things that I like to talk about is marital agreements, right? Because the prenup has a big connotation, and people have judgments and thoughts about it a lot of the time. And one of the things that I know I didn't realize as a young person stepping into my marriage is that if you always have a marriage agreement, it's just whether or not you're defaulting to the marriage agreement in your state,
yeah.
um, or whether or not you design your own. And so these are questions that come up a lot. And so I put that together and I include all of those conversations in, in Step Parent Success School. It links to all those recordings so people can look at them.
I love it. It's all about. It feels to me sometimes communication, and
A
I know
lot of it,
you.
yeah.
Yeah, and you've talked about how this is part of that school is like learning, you know, maybe new communication skills or when, how, where to communicate.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is one of those, sometimes people know that when they start out. They're like, hey, we need to work on our communication skill. But I find more often that most of us really feel like we're excellent communicators. Truthfully, we're probably not the good judge of that for ourselves, right? Like we probably always think that. But most of us, at least I didn't, I studied a variety of ways to communicate when I was in school. And I think that we don't actually learn interpersonal relationship communication, um, unless somebody sits down and talks about it. So I'm open about the fact that early on in our marriage, I did premarital counseling with my husband before we got married, and then we were back in premarital counseling several times in the early stages of our relationship, which is fine. One of the things that is hilarious about my experience is the therapist was telling me, "Hey, we use I statements, these kind of things," and I really, really thought I was doing that. But what I was doing was saying things like, I think your children are misbehaved. And I learned that's not actually what they mean when they say I statements. Right? That's not. So if somebody had never taken the time to tell me, hey, that's not actually what we mean when we say that, this is what an I statement would look like. Um, how are you ever going to know? How are you ever going to know? Yeah.
Yeah, oh my God. I love that. I love the sort of, real world fixes. But I also saw somewhere on your website where you said this the school isn't a fix. It's not a
Right.
band-aid. And that's how it differs from really a lot of training courses
Mhm.
where, okay, you can fix this by doing that, and fix this by doing that. But you're not just trying to fix a thing, you're trying to kind of make someone be a successful grandparent, step parent.
Could be a
And
grandparent.
you could be a grandparent. Now, after I
Could be a
said that, I
grandparent.
thought, yeah, could be a grandparent.
Could be a
But
grandparent. Yeah. There's a lot of alignment between the step parent relationship and the in-law relationship.
oh
It's
God, yeah,
like very similar. And so these things come in handy. Um, the number of times, and I like, so a lot of times will say, I wish I had known this before. If I had known these things before, then I could have avoided certain situations. And I really do think that's I don't think it's not always the most healthy line of thought because you couldn't have known it before, you didn't know it. But these are foundational skills, right? Hopefully foundational skills that people can apply in their own way. Because like, so one of the things I talk about is it's like everybody talks about setting up family values and having a value-based family, but not a lot of people talk about how do you agree on your values for your family? How do you talk to your kids and your partner
yep,
about values? What do you do if one person is carrying value? Well, everybody does this, right? Everybody's carrying values from their previous family, whether it's your family of origin when you were a kid or an earlier marriage. How do you talk about those things? And so there's probably like unlimited ways to do that. And what people choose as their individual values really is none of my business, right? But how to have the conversation and have it be loving and supportive um, is really good, is really helpful. And then you can use that. Like, I hear back from people who use these things, they come back and they're like, I use this in the strangest place, but um, it's yeah, that's the difference. That's the difference. I'm not trying to tell anybody necessarily how to do it. I'm just trying to offer them some skills and strategies that can empower them to make the choices on their own. And one of the reasons I chose success as a title and one of the core missions of the course is that it is good to figure out what you think success means in terms of your family. Because otherwise, what are you working towards?
yep,
Like you just may not know.
yep. That you just answered my question, which was going to be, kind of how do I know I become a successful step parent? It's it's not a one size fits all, is it?
It really isn't. I did a survey at the beginning of my coaching, and I surveyed. It wasn't a huge amount of people, but at least a couple hundred. I got over 100 responses because that's what I wanted. I wanted that in my base, and I asked them, what if there's one thing that you could do that you think would improve and make your family successful, what would it be? And the really scary thing was that the most popular answer is that they wish that somebody in their family didn't exist. So, like the
Oh,
ex didn't exist or the kids didn't exist. And the reason that that really got my attention is because that's the one thing we can't do, right? Like the awareness that if this is the way your family is constructed, you're just beating your head into a wall if you're trying to pretend like there's some version of your future that doesn't include these people who really do exist. And so defining that for yourself, and there's layers of that, right?
yeah,
Layers of why people feel that. And the feelings and the emotions are true, but doing the inner thinking and the inner work to figure out what's driving that and reconcile your real life with what you want, that's big time internal work.
yeah,
And one of the things that's interesting about that is that even if you hire somebody to help you with it, that's always something we have to do by ourselves.
yes. That's what it sounds like. It's like you're helping people to help themselves. It's not a here, I'm going to teach you these
Right.
things. You're going to teach yourself as you
Yeah.
go through it.
That's my hope. That's my hope. Yeah. That's my
I
hope. So
love that.
it's yeah.
Wow, we just blasted through 30 minutes.
Well, you only
And
had 927 things for us to talk about. So, yeah.
I know, but we got through 904. And so that means you have to come back on
Okay.
because as we're going along, I'm thinking, okay, I want to talk about this more and I want to talk about that more. But we are out of time. So thank you very much. And before you go, though, I do want to give you the opportunity to tell people how they can get a hold of you if they would like to either do the class or just talk with you.
So the school has a website, stepparentsuccessschool.com. There are some free things that are on offer there for anybody, which will put you into my email community where I email out a couple times a week, friendly, entertaining things. I always think my emails are captivating. And earlier today, I got an apology from somebody who said, I love your messages, but I'm dropping off because I have to focus on med school. Most polite unsubscribe notice I've ever gotten. But that's where you will get gentle nudges of the things that I'm up to and how to do that. And because it's me, you just hit reply to any of those messages and you can get in contact with me directly.
I love that. I mean, I've been listening to them here, and you know, you think to yourself, God, these random thoughts but they're not random. They kind of go together and they're really good. So I would encourage people to do that as well. So thank you, Amy, for being
Thank
here.
you. You're welcome.
And thank you, everyone else, for joining us today. If you have any further questions on today's topic, either you can, of course, get a hold of Amy, or you can post it here and we can get you connected with Amy. So until next time, as I always say, stay safe, stay happy,